And thank you for having me. Today we are going to be talking about mental health and suicidality in the Black community. We felt that this was really an important topic to talk about now with everything that is going on in the news and everything that's going on in the world. One of the things that is really important for the DEILC is to really make sure that we are bringing topics that are timely and topics that are important and in the time frame that individuals are experiencing different news events or different things within their families. And so I'm going to set kind of the stage for you. I'll kind of set everything up, and then Tonja is going to jump in with her experience. This is going to be big on discussion. And then I will close with what can we do? What are some resources if you are seeing this with family members or you just want to help and support? What can we do and what resources are out there will be at the end. So if we can move to the next slide. So in the news, we thought that this was really timely to talk about specifically suicidality in the Black community, because in the last 6 to 8 weeks, we've really seen high profile individuals that have died by suicide. And according to the Suicide Prevention Resources Center, suicide rates have decreased with Americans, but Black suicide rates have gone up. And young adult suicide is highest among African Americans. And just in some of my conversations with staff and some presentations that I have done recently, the individuals that we have pictured here have really made an impact on individuals' lives. We've seen them in shows or in pageants or all of that, or have followed their careers and have really started to bring up the question of why, what's happening, how come we didn't see it, all of those things. So we really wanted to bring about this forum to be able to at least start that conversation on what's going on, what's happening, and what we can do. So we're going to start with a poll question to see if we can get just some thoughts on where individuals think that the rates of suicide are the highest among African Americans and among the specific age group. So you have 3 age groups up on your screen, and you will soon see the poll question. And the question is, according to research, suicides are the highest among which Black age group in the community? And I'm going to give everyone a little bit of time to answer this question. You should have seen the poll pop up on your screen, and you can just click on the question, and we'll give it about another minute, and then we'll see what everybody said. Or Carrie, if you can see the poll question or let me know. There it is. Let me know what the answers are. So we have a very in-tuned, very great group with us today. So A, the ages 12 to 15, B, the ages were 15 and 19, and C, the ages were 25 to 34. And 54% of you guys said 25 to 34. And 54% of you are absolutely correct. So we can move to the next slide, and we'll talk about what the statistics are for these age groups. So the data shows that according to the 2020 National Institute for Mental Health article, in 2018, suicide became the second leading cause of death in Black children ages 10 to 14, and the third leading cause of death in Black adolescents aged 15 to 19. And research has determined that Black children are more likely to die by suicide than their white peers. And then over the last decade, suicide rates in the United States have increased dramatically among racial and ethnic minorities, and Black Americans in particular. Suicide deaths occur across the lifespan and have increased for Black youth, but the highest rate of death is among Black Americans aged 25 to 34 years of age. And then finally, suicidal thoughts, plans, and attempts are also rising among Black and African American young adults, while still lower than the overall US population, age 18 to 25, 9.5% of Black and African Americans, and then 18 to 25-year-olds had serious thoughts of suicide in 2018 compared to 6% in 2008. And sorry, it's just reading it really starts to bring it home. And then 3.6% made a plan in 2018 compared to 2.1% in 2008, and 2.4% made an attempt in 2018 compared to 1.5% in 2008. So all of this is really to show what the data is saying on what's happening within our Black community. Suicide rates are dramatically increasing and are on the rise compared from 2008 to now, with the highest suicide rates between the ages of 25 and 34. And then the research that says that Black children are more likely to die by suicide than their white peers. And so with all of this data, with all of this information, and especially with the most recent news stories and individuals that we've seen who have died by suicide recently, Tonja and I thought that this would be the time to really have this conversation. We are also still in Black History Month, but really to have this conversation around mental health and suicidality. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Tonja to get the discussion started. And then we'll go for a bit, and then we'll jump into some resources, information, and things that we can do to help our community, our family members, our coworkers, our friends, our neighbors. So I'm going to pass it over to Tonja.
Thank you so much, Joy, and thank you everyone for being on the call today. I think this is going to be a great conversation. You know, as I was, thinking about everything, and Joy hit the nail on the head when she said how, we have to be really intentional and in tune on what's going on in our community and our country, which we all are. And because it's, on our news feeds and everywhere else, and, people are talking about it. And so, somebody asked me when I first heard about, the beauty queen, oh my God, what do you think about this? Isn't this a tragic? And I'm like, it really is. And also, to the young brother that, I heard in my own community who took his own life. And so, and not being insensitive to her death, but unfortunately, this happens more often than we think. But when it's someone who is famous or someone who appears to have everything, going on with them and having this perfect life, then it really shocks us. And I understand that. But I'm so grateful to be a part of a team where we're always on the cutting edge of trying to prevent these things from happening, having these conversations, and not just being knee-jerk, if you will. But we know that when things happen, we have to talk about it because we have everybody's attention. But we also know that the attention span for most people is really short, particularly when stuff is in the news, because it could be something that's trending and relevant today, and then something else, happens, and then we're on to something else. But I think that this is an ongoing conversation that we have to have continuously until we really can see the change and we can hear people talking about it more mainstream. And so as I was, thinking about what would we talk about today? I know we've talked about this and we've had these discussions in the past, but I thought about, my own life, and I thought about just how the lives of other people that I interface with. One of the things that I'm on the board of the Baton Rouge Crisis Intervention Center, and Dr. Frank Campbell, he's one of the top suicidologists in the country, and he's right here in Baton Rouge, and he's also one of my mentors. And I never forget, going to him and having these conversations on why isn't there any more outreach going to, African American communities or communities that are underserved, why we're not going in those communities, why we're not having those conversations, and, and things of that nature. And so one of the things he said, I tell people all the time the same thing, Tonja, but being a white man, it's not, people are like, I don't get what you're saying, Frank. And he's like, well, we know that suicide normally happens white males, then white females, then African-American males, and then Black females are last. And he said, as we're doing all this training and research, we need to look at, the strength of, the Black females, and why, they're, low on the totem pole when it comes to, suicide, death by suicide, which is a good thing. But, we can talk about resilience and strength and stuff like that. And we know that historically, Black women, we've always had to hold it down from day one. And we can talk about how we can look back and see how mental health and suicide, of course, all the things that, we have been through as a people, and how that whole trauma and seeing a whole lot of stuff surface, in our country and community in the last, 2 to 5 years have just really brought a lot of things up to surface. And so when you've seen that uptick, I believe that it's because of things that we have not talked about, things that we have not addressed, not only in our communities in our country, but also in our homes. Again, if you guys know, you probably heard me say this. My mom always said that charity begins at home and spreads abroad. And I always thought about, what the heck does that mean? I didn't know that as a kid. And as I got older, I'm like, oh, it starts at home first. Okay, I got that. It makes sense. And so we have not had these conversations in our community of color because we were, I'm speaking for myself now, but as I talk to other, people from around the country, those are conversations that we never had, because we don't do that. We go to clergy, or we keep it in the family. We put it under the rug. We put it under blood, and we keep it moving. But we know that as we put stuff under the rug, and as we continue to stuff that rug that was flat now becomes, it becomes a stumbling block. And before you know it, we're tripping all on it. And so the family dynamic changes, because now, stuff that we didn't put under the rug is now a big old thing in the middle of the floor, and we have to address it. We can't walk around it anymore. We can't trip on it anymore. We have to address it. And, we've been told to be strong for so long, and that's great. And we have to be. We had no choice. We had to be resilient. But, even the strong get tired. For real. I mean, we can talk about resilience all day, and that's great, that we have that fortitude and we're strong, and particularly for those of us who work in this field. But we all need a break. We all need grace. And, people are going through stuff, and, we wonder why will a person who, have it so together would want to take their life. And why would anybody, want to take their life? And as I talk to people, and I was talking to you about being a part of the Baton Rouge Crisis Intervention, one of the things that we are looking at is doing psychological autopsies. And I guess you're going, well, what does that mean? Well, when a person decides to, kill themselves, really, having some conversations with the family on maybe what their, mental health history was. Maybe did you see some of the signs? Maybe what are some of the things that they were going through, in order to help us prevent people wanting to take their own lives. I never forget when I heard, the whole thing, zero suicide. I'm like, oh, will that ever happen? And at one time I was, pretty hesitant about that. But now I believe that we can, because we can have conversations, and we can equip people, like Joy said, not only, to check on your strong friends, but when you do check on your strong friends, and if your strong friends say something, then what resources, what do we say, what do we do? And going back to Dr. Campbell, I never forget, I asked him, I said, so how do we tell people, how to address someone who's, wanting to take their own life? And he said, well, one of the things that we can do is ask the person, where does it hurt and how can I help? And so we know that historically, again, African Americans, we don't reach out, because that's something culturally been told not to do. That's what other people do. They go to psychiatrists, they go to therapists. We don't go tell people our problems. And so we have to change that in our own community, in our own homes first, in our own homes first. And so when our family members or friends who are just having a bad day or having challenges, that we're open to hear what they have to say, and how do we even communicate back with them. And I think that's a big one right there, because that can be kind of scary. I had a conversation with my my circle of trust about I guess about a week and a half ago, and I'll share this with you. So my diagnosis is PTSD. I've been in recovery for 38 years. The getting over the drugs was a pretty easy thing for me, but dealing with the mental health piece was a bit challenging, because I know people look at you different when you tell them, I'm in recovery, and I haven't used in 38 years. Oh, that's great. That's wonderful. Oh my goodness. Yes. And then when you tell them you have a diagnosis, a mental health diagnosis or a mental illness, because mental health sounds a little better. When you say I have a mental illness diagnosis, people look at you a little different. And sometimes, it's because they don't know what to say, because that is a conversation that we normally don't have. And normally people don't walk up to you and say, oh yeah, I had that diagnosis, or like when we talking to a person and we're like, so yeah, I went to the doctor and, I was just diagnosed with high blood pressure. And we get into conversations about, what, yeah, my doctor put me on this and I have to do this and I have to do that. And we have these healthy conversations about some of our health issues. But when it comes to mental health, I think it just really scares people, because it's been so taboo. It's something we don't talk about. And from a perspective of someone who has a mental health diagnosis, I can see the fear. I can see the challenges when I'm talking to particular people, even depending on where they're coming from. For example, if it's someone who has a strong faith, which I believe we all do, but a lot of times people think, well, mental health is more something demonic. Mental health is something more of a spiritual, a spiritual journey, and not so much, our health, not realizing our brain and our heart and our other organs are all important, and our brain we have to take care of. And so when we're having these conversations, we have to be ready for what people are going to tell us, and do it when it's not in a non-judging way. So I said that, I had a conversation with my friends a couple of weeks ago. I was asked to be on the board here in the state of Louisiana. And so when I got on the call, I guess about 2 months ago, I was, introduced, and then the lady who was introducing the other person that was going to be on the board, she said, this is such and such, and he's a good friend of mine, and he does this in the community, and he does this, this, and this, and this. And then she said his name. And when she said his name, and I looked down on the on my computer, it was the guy who molested me. And I'm like, okay, so what do I do? Because I hadn't seen him in years. I was shocked. I was just, in a place of what do I do? Because I know I'm being filmed and I know people are watching. So I'm like, okay, what do I do? So I introduced myself, and then I immediately just got off the call. And then a couple of hours later, I called my husband, and I called my therapist the next day. And then I started having some sleeping issues. And then I got some other stuff going on. So I hadn't been sleeping that well. And so when I reached out to my friends a couple of weeks ago and to say, look, here's what's going on. Don't be alarmed. You guys are in my circle of 5. I haven't been sleeping well. Let me tell you why. No, I have not thought about killing myself. But if I don't sleep, this can happen, this can happen, this can happen, and this can happen. And so the response was all the same, but I know my friends. And so they all, came to me from a different perspective. And one in particular, I was more concerned about her than I'm sure she was concerned about me, because she was scared. And she just didn't know how to have this conversation with me. And so me trying to have a conversation with my friends about, mental health, or about, the struggles and the journeys. I know that can be a little difficult, but it's difficult conversations that we know that we have to have. I'm reminded of another true story. And as we're talking about, people who seem to have it all together, and why would they take their own lives? But they, they have money, they have fame, and they have this. And so I know I've been told that before. I never forget about, many, many years ago when I started experiencing PTSD. I wasn't even diagnosed yet. And so I was telling, a dear friend of mine that I'm depressed and I don't understand why. And they're just like, well, what do you got to be depressed for? You got this, this, and this, and this. And so they meant well, but that made me feel more guilty. That made me feel more ashamed, because they were right. And so I didn't even understand why I was having all these feelings. And so, like I said, they meant what they were trying to tell me was good, but it put me in a deep, even darker depression, because I felt like, what, they're right. I have all this. Why am I feeling this way? I'm shamed, so I can't even talk to anybody else about it because I get these kind of reactions. So I have a good friend of mine who about 6 years ago, it was made national news. It was this 2 doctors, African-American. They lived here, in the South, in Atlanta. And both of her kids went to Ivy League schools. They were both accomplished doctors who had, a home in Georgia. They traveled a lot. The kids went great schools, 2 doctors, great income, beach house, this house, that, just well accomplished. And they got a divorce. And so they were divorced, and a year and a half later, she killed both of her kids and herself. And so my friend, who was best friends with her, she said something that resonated with me. And she said, I talked to her every day for 15 years. We were best friends. And I know she was struggling and, from the divorce, but we thought, that she all had shook back. We know that, having that perfect life, people saw them as the perfect couple. And so that was shame to her. And so Pam said something so profound. She said, I talked to her all that week. I talked to her that day, 3 times that day. And I keep asking myself, what were we really talking about? If she was that hurt, that wounded, what were we really talking about? And it was such an aha moment for me, because then I had to put myself in check and go, let me make sure I'm doing the same thing for my friends. Forget about me having a mental health diagnosis. What about my friends? What about my family? And so then I started having conversations with my friends and my family. So how you doing? I'm okay. Define okay for me, if you don't mind. So tell me how you really feeling. And just really creating a space to go, look, I just want to let you know, I want to have serious conversations. I don't want to just have surface conversation about, where we're going, when we go out on a girls trip, or what are we gonna, do when, or things like that. What are the real conversations that we're having? What are you really going through? We say check on our strong friends. It's okay not to be okay. But we really need to make sure when those spaces happen that we're really sincere, that we're really listening. And look, even if you're not sure, let's be honest and open with our family and our friends on where we are. Because in the African-American community, we have to change the narrative. We have to change the way we talk about mental health in our families. We talk about uncle and our grandmother having diabetes and, mama having high blood pressure. Y'all know y'all can't eat much salt. Mama had high blood pressure. Y'all know we can't do this, because Papa had this. And we need to really talk about the history of our family. We can talk about the history of our ancestors. We know the struggles and the things that they went through. But look, that was trauma for all of them. I mean, my grandmother and my mom, I still remember them having to work in places they still couldn't eat in the front of the restaurant. I remember that as a little girl. So, just imagine, the trauma that they have, that trauma has been, passed down in some shape, form, or fashion. And because trauma is real. And so we have to have these discussions around trauma. And we know that, there's, that trauma happens through, racism. It happens through, individual events. It happens through a whole lot of stuff. And I'm reminded of the pair of two aces. And most of us on the call, we know about, the ACE scores and stuff like that, and how kids, if they've been, prone to this, and this at an early age, this will probably happen. But what about the other ACEs? We call it the pair of ACEs, and that's the advanced adverse community experience, where you have a person who is inside of a space or a home that's trauma going on, and now they walk out into a society that's really not set up, to heal them. That's really not set up to hear them. That's really not set up to help them go through the trauma. So I'm glad we're having all these conversations about trauma and what untreated trauma looks like and why we should get treated. And I'm glad we're having conversations about how therapy isn't scary and therapy is cool. And you see all of this now when it comes to community of colors. And we still have to have these conversations, and it can't just be a hashtag and it can't just be a phrase, but we have to have them in our home. For example, I've been married for 28 years, and I have my husband's he's a pretty good man. And I'm sure that as you guys, as I talk about this, you're going to go, oh yeah, that's right. And Joy, I know you can, it'll resonate with you because you have two, cute, beautiful, handsome, smart boys. And so I was talking to a sister one day who was just going through some stuff, and she was just saying how unattached her husband, was, and how, she's always been in these relationships with, men who were just not emotional. And I thought about it. I'm just like, I thought about my brother, and I thought about my dad always telling my brother, men don't cry. Okay. I always heard my dad telling my brother, men don't show their feelings. And I realized what we've done is that we're raising young Black boys to not feel. We're raising them to say, you got to be a man. You can't cry. Well, why not? Because then what they do is they grow up to be, men who are now in marriages or in relationships. And we wonder why they're like emotional, not, where we think they should be, where, they're like, I'm not going to tell you my feelings because I've been told all my life not to, or to suck it up, or men don't cry, men don't share their feelings. That's being soft. We got to change that. That's not being soft. That's being sensitive. And sensitivity is something we all should have. And so we have to change these conversations, particularly when it comes to our Black boys, so they can grow up and they can be emotionally strong men. I go back again to what my friend Pam said. So what were we really talking about? And so I'm glad that today we're really talking about mental health. I'm glad we're talking about that it's okay to not be okay. And it's okay to know sometimes not what to do, but to have resources available, or just to know, what, I don't know it all, but let me search, let me see what the resources are out there so I can help my friends, so I can help my family. But I think, we have to just really take that responsibility to change that narrative, to talk about that in our homes, because when our young folk, or when we go out into a community that's really not set up to heal us from the trauma historically of the past, and then we got, recent trauma going on, we have to create those spaces. We have to create those conversations so people can begin to heal. One of the things I did realize, guys, and I know that from a perspective of being in a mental hospital 7 years ago, and I've been in a mental hospital before, and I've encountered some family members when I was younger. But this particular time, it was my husband, it was my friends, it was my colleagues, it was a plethora of people came through that hospital when I was there. And I'll never forget sitting at this table, looking at their faces. And I realized that they were terrified. Each and every one of them had the same look of horror on their face. They were so scared, for me. And they was just really just mortified. And I remember seeing their faces. And that's when I realized that me being in so much pain and not wanting to be a burden to them would not have stopped with me deciding to kill myself. That pain that I was experiencing would have been transferred over to them. That was an aha moment. That was a moment that woke me up like nothing else had ever had, because I realized I did not want that pain that I was experiencing to be transferred to them. We talk about family curses. We talk about generational curses. Well, I think, when we were talking about Joy's bio, and she said about being intentional about wanting to change things, generational and culture and stuff like that. And that's how we change it, through generations when we're talking about family and we're talking about in being in real relationships. We have to have those conversations. We have to and then look, I want to challenge each and every one of us today as we think about this conversation, as we think about our family, as we think about our friends, and as we think about, all these wonderful ways that we can communicate via text, Zoom, FaceTime, Facebook, you name it. What are the real conversations that we're having? We know people are going through a lot. We're looking at the stuff that's happening in Ukraine. We're looking at, we're still in COVID. We're looking at all the political climate and just a whole plethora of stuff. We all got to be feeling some kind of way. So we have to be real intentional about asking people where they really are, how they're really doing, and just being there and being an active listener. And if those conversations are not coming to us, let's bring those conversations to the table. Why not? That's how we change the narrative. That is how we save lives. That is how we, in our culture, make it mainstream to talk about mental health and how important it is. Because we don't want to look back and go, you know what? I knew something was wrong, but I didn't say anything because I was scared or I didn't know what to do. And that's okay. But, that's why we have these resources. And I believe that's why, RI is, on the cusp, on just the cusp of just changing the way we look at mental health in a whole different way. And so we have to be sensitive to that, even with 988 coming up, guys. And I'll say this, is that, the biggest concern for me is that, historically, we do not use, calls. We do not make those calls to those lifelines. That's one resource we don't do. And so we have to change that, because if we're going to have this beautiful, amazing system put in place, we want people to call that 988 and not 911 and still, come in contact with law enforcement, who do a good job at, what they do, but that it's not their job to be social workers and, get people in the care that they need, in their time of crisis. So I believe having these conversations, I believe encouraging each and every one of us to ask ourselves, when we're talking to our family, when we're talking to our friends, what are we really talking about? And right now, since going back to what Joy said, people are still talking about, the people in the news who took their own lives. So why not have this conversation? Why not really ask our family members and our loved ones, how are you really feeling? It's okay to feel. You can be in your feelings. It's okay to be there. And if they need help, how to encourage them to get the help that they need. So I'm glad we're having these conversations and discussions. And I look forward to, us interacting with each other on a whole nother level today. And then when we come back this time next year, we've taken it to a whole nother level as well. I'll turn it back over to Joy.
Thank you, Tonja. While you were talking, I was also thinking about, but before we jump back into the slides, I was also thinking about how things are portrayed in the news sometimes, and what are your thoughts on that? Specifically for the individuals that we had put up on the screen, right? So when I'm reading about Chelsea Christ, it says, but she was so beautiful. She was so accomplished. She had everything. How come? Or he was in The Walking Dead, or, all of these things, almost like it's, you can't have both. You are either accomplished or you have mental illness, or you are so beautiful. And then on this side, you have suicidal thoughts. It's almost this disconnect that we see over and over and over when individuals are talked about or portrayed. So when you were talking, it just kept coming back to me of what are your thoughts on kind of that language, that conversation, that discussion, that thread keeps playing out over and over and over, and how we are reading about individuals that die by suicide sometimes.
Well, you know, the brain is an amazing thing, and it's the scars that we don't see, you know, that people, you know, are really going through. And a lot of times, you know, because we're such a surface, you know, space. I'm talking about as a country, and everything is on surface, on what we see and how we want things to be portrayed. Everything is intentional, but people, you know, life hurts. And again, you know, I've seen so many people who struggle from the curbside to the country club, and it's all the same. I mean, you know, it's like I said, it's the scars that you don't see. It's where, you know, people maybe have some kind of chemical imbalance or some kind of hormone deficiency that will cause them to have mental illness. And I think that, you know, that's why when people are struggling, we don't want to say anything, because what it looks like, people go, but how can that be? How can it be possible? You have this, and this. But again, you know, mental health, we have to see it just like any other health issue, and not make it taboo when a person go, well, you know, I'm depressed, and oh girl, you go get a drink. Oh girl, just watch some comedy. Okay, but you know, it's real, and it's necessary that we have conversations like this to let people know that it's okay, that our brain is just like any other organ in our body. And look, again, like I said, you know, we have to realize that everybody hurt, everybody's going through something. And so we have to be in a position to be honest with ourselves that when we're going through something, we don't want people to know about it. So imagine someone who has this, and this, and this, and had this great life. And of course, now you're on TV and you have all this stuff, and your mama's famous, you're the mayor. You know, you really feel embarrassed that you have some kind of anxiety or some kind of depression, because your life, you know, looks totally different. And so again, we just have to make it more conducive to have conversations like this, so people know that they don't have to suffer in silence. And it is okay to reach out and get the help, no matter who you are, how much money you have in the bank, how much money you don't have in the bank, who your mom and daddy is, who they're not, and just make it more mainstream to have these conversations. Because that's the only way it's going to change, is when we reduce the stigma and we take the sting out the shame.
Yeah. So, but before I look through some of the chat to see if there's any questions or anything like that to continue the discussion, I just want to add in one more piece, and it might be a little selfish on my end, but it's around the concept of you've said several times, check on your strong friends, right? And I think there is this expectation for people to be quote unquote strong, to be able to handle it all, to be able to keep going, no matter what has happened, no matter what you're experiencing that day. It's you pull yourself up by your bootstraps and you just keep going, and that's what gets celebrated. The more you can do. I was reading something on social media the other day, and it said, we have to let go of the thought that we have to earn our rest. We have to be, we have to earn the ability to stop, and that the focus should be on go, go, go. The stronger you are, the better, the more you do, the better. And so when we're talking about this and mental health and caring for ourselves and all of that, I just wonder what would you say after check on your strong friends? Because I think there's a part of us that expect individuals to be strong all the time. And if you're strong, then that means that you can just keep going, and there's nothing that's going to kind of slow you down.
So yeah, I mean, we need to allow people to to let them know that it's okay to be weak, that you're going to have a moment. A moment of weakness does not make you, oh my goodness, you're not going to, be able to pull yourself from the bootstraps. But we all have these moments of weakness and challenges. And so we have to allow people, to let them know that, it's okay for you to, not be strong right now. You don't have to shoulder this. Go take a nap, go to the spa if you can, go take a walk. I mean, just go get in the bed. It's okay to just binge, go take a nap. Sometimes you just need to tell a person, just go take a nap. Just go take a nap. And that is okay. Like you said, we have to let people know that you don't have to be strong all the time. Every good soldier, knows that you can't, you can't be on a 10 at all times. I mean, just think about the people who have these high pressure jobs. Talking about, I was talking to a friend of mine this morning, and this was a friend that she was asking me, how'd you sleep this weekend? And I was just telling, her about different things. And she's like, yeah, because I have another friend, and he said that, when he was a doctor and he was on rotation, he stayed up for 7 days, and what that looks like and stuff like that. So, I mean, we have to let people know that it's okay to rest. There's blessing in resting. We talk about recovery, but what about just recovery period from the work week? What about recovery, from a relationship gone bad? What about recovery from, losing, a loved one? What about just recovery of just having a bad week? I mean, we have to let people know that's how they recover, by resting, by pulling away. But we're living in a society where, these folks that we're talking about, all of them in high profile positions, and they were probably going through stuff, but their stuff is magnified and people see that now. And so they were thinking probably, me showing a sign of weakness is not cool. But we have to allow people, and look, this is not a Bible study, but it just talks about, when we're weak, how spiritually there's an inner peace, there's something inside of us that becomes stronger. And that could be from your spirituality. That could be from, going, being with friends and families. And so we just need to let people know that, when you're having a moment of weakness, or look, I tell everybody, it's okay to have a pity party. I'll give you 10 minutes. Now, after 10 minutes, we're going to have to talk about it. But everybody deserves a 10-minute pity party, Joy. I mean, to cry, to curse. I know we don't do that. To snot, to roll on the floor, do whatever you want to. But we need to let people know it's okay to have a pity party. 10 minutes, though. 10 minutes.
10 minutes. Not
10 minutes.
Not 11, just 10.
Not 11, 10 minutes.
I so appreciate this conversation. I'm looking through the chat right now, and there's definitely support for that statement, almost that automatic of I'm fine when anyone is asking how we are. The fear of burdening others by being honest. Someone said that they prefer to ask twice. So when they ask how someone is, they say I'm fine, and then they ask, no, how are you really? To be able to get past those surface conversations and down into what's really going on with individuals, taking that 10 minutes to actually get into some depth. Here is a question that I find interesting. It's from Julian. It says, I'd like to know Tonja's take on how she feels our ancestors dealt with trauma while living in it versus our modern day experience.
Well, it's almost like a fish being in water. When you're in the water, you don't even know you're wet. It's just what you're used to, because it's the situation that you've been in. And so I think historically, we have not even talked about, trauma. I said what gave me freedom when I was able to put a name with the pain, not just being called crazy or being called, angry or whatever. I'm like, wait, this is that. And so back in the day, our ancestors, they had to do what they had to do. It was called survival mode. And they did not know that they were experiencing trauma, and that this trauma was going to be something that was going to be, passed on from generation to generation. Because again, in order for us to, manage something, we have to measure it. And so when we don't know what it is, then how do we even relate to it? And I think that was different because they were in the thick of it. They didn't realize because that's all they knew. But, you know, of course, when we now know better, it's our job to do better. So we can have these conversations to stop these generational or these, you know, cultural things from happening. So it will not be passed down to my niece or my nephew. So I think that now that we're able to say what trauma is, what trauma stems from, and how we can address it and how can we treat it, can be a game changer. Now, I would like to flip the script for a few minutes. Joy, I have a question for you.
Oh, you have a question? Oh.
Yeah, okay. So you, because I don't know your boys, but I just love your boys. And, you know, because I just see their sweet faces on social media and stuff like that. But when I talked about earlier about, you know, we talk about Black men being insensitive or unemotional or unattached and stuff like that. And how do we change those conversations? You have two, you know, young boys. How do you talk to your boys about being in their feelings and, you know, men don't cry and suck it up and you got to take it like a man? Or, you know, look, my nephews, I was hugging them one day and I was loving on them because I hadn't seen them in like 3 weeks and I was just loving on both of them. And my nephew, who's one of the most sensitive men I knew, he's like, get away from T-Bit. That's going to make them soft. And I almost went off on little Kevin. I'm like, that's not going to make them soft. So how do you have those conversations or how do you do that?
Oh, you go straight for my soft spot. So to know me is to know my children. I think if you probably saw them like running behind my head right when we were getting started, because that's just how it is. So for my boys, they are 5 and 9. We teach them that, one, we've taught them to identify what their feelings are, and to be able to understand what their feelings are, to be able to process that in a very safe space, and to be able to talk about how they're feeling, what brought them to that conclusion, and then how to react from that. Interestingly enough, my youngest came to me yesterday and said, Google hurt my feelings, mommy. And I was like, oh, okay, so we haven't quite gotten to the AI stuff yet, but apparently he was arguing with our Alexa. But I think we have to go against the narrative. My husband has seen how this mantra of being tough isn't helpful when you get older. Not being able to identify your feelings or understand what's going on around you, or to be able to process information that comes with your emotions as well, is just not going to serve them well. And they have a right to live in this society. They have a right to feel what they feel just like everybody else, without individuals being scared or afraid of them, or telling them to stop, or telling them that it's not okay. So I give them their right to feel the way that they are going to feel, and to be able to work through that, because when they get older, I want them to be able to connect with their partners, whoever that's going to be, to connect with their children, if that's a choice of theirs, or to understand what their passions are, to be able to feel what they're feeling without exploding or getting upset or doing things that are not positive. So that's the way that we see it. My husband is African, and so that adds another layer of this strong man mentality to our lives. But I think at the end of the day, I make sure that my boys have a safe space to express their feelings, and to be able to understand them and process them. As I say a lot, I want to break generational curses. And so I see my dad I see my brother. I see like the men in my life who weren't given that opportunity,
Right.
and how they've had to live. And I don't want that for my children. So that's what we do. Except on, the soccer field or something like that. There are times and places when you're on the soccer field, I'm gonna need you to play. There's no crying in soccer. But everywhere else, absolutely, to have that safe space to express themselves. And they are strong and sensitive and loving and funny and assertive all at the same time. And that's really the type of adults that I would like them to be when they get older. And I think that's what we have to remember. We are raising little people. We're raising adults. How would we want them to interact with the world when they get older? And I want them to have all of that. So yeah, that's how we do it. So we are a little bit in. Great question though, Tonja. I was not expecting to be asked a question. I'm usually the one that asks the question. Let's see. So we have a couple of comments that I think would be great. If anyone wants to speak up before we get back to our PowerPoint to talk about the shift to resources. We've got a great response from Dr. Shana, Dr. Chuck, from Susan, from Donna, from Monica. Is there anyone who would like to join the conversation?
So Joy, yeah, I would actually, and I just would like to just say this is great. I think I left it in the message, but the content that Tonja is sharing and her personal experiences, as well as what you talked about, how you're raising your young kings, is great. And I would just like to just kind of piggyback on that. Some of you may know, some of you may not know. Obviously, I'm a young African American man. And I've also been a single father for about 10 years of my life, raising a young man as well. And I think one of the main things that I've been kind of really focusing on with my young sons is being transparent. And it's, you really can't hide anything from them these days. They're going to find out. So, blowing smoke up there, what's really not going to help. So, I think by me being vulnerable and transparent with my boys has really helped me the most. Just wanted to share that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that is something that hasn't always happened, right? Parents were expected to hide the stress, hide everything that was going on that wasn't positive, in the hopes that children only experience the positives and not worry about the things that they worried about. And I completely agree, Carlos, with changing that, and allowing them to see the vulnerabilities in how life is, while also keeping them safe and comfortable in that safe space and all of that. I completely agree with that.
I have to agree as well. I face a lot of those challenges as well. Especially is very prevalent in the single parent community, and in the Black community, with the rising number of single parents. I myself am a single parent who am raising 2 adolescent males and a teenage daughter who also suffered from mental health issues and things, just going through the years. So, having those tools, what did those conversations look like? Because see, at the end of the day, you've got society talking to them, and then you've got us talking to them. So how do we come together to provide those tools. And what do those conversations look like? The world is going to talk to them. Social media is talking to them. They have a plethora of things at their disposal every day. And as a single parent, you know, we've got this much time in the day to have these conversations with them, you know, and creating those moments. But there is no male fathers in the home. So as single mothers, we're doing it all. We're playing both roles, you know, and different things like that. And we have those conversations to the best of our ability. And it's just, you know, making sure that we have those tools and resources. What do those conversations look like? How do we begin to change it so that more of us are having those conversations with our kids to make a bigger impact in our community? So those are things that I often encounter in working. I work a lot with the youth in the community as well. And so the conversations we have with our young ones versus the conversations we have with our adolescents, and then the males that we get that are 18 and older, you know, those type of conversations. So it's a little tough, and I see it from both sides. Being a single parent raising 3 adolescent teenagers myself, it gets hard, you know, and those conversations, and like you said, you got to talk to them. You got to be very transparent with them, but there's not enough of us that are communicating that make the time, you know, to make the impact.
Yeah, and I want to, you know, comment on something you said. That's one of the things that we, you know, started doing, I guess, about 3 years ago when we were having healing circles. We were doing healing circles in our community. We were doing them in coffee shops, and then we started doing them a lot in schools. And then when COVID hit, we were like, so how do we do this now? I'm like, well, healing begins at the house, right? So, you know, just encouraging, you know, families how to have that conversation. You don't just want to, you know, I mean, just to ask your family, you know, well, how you doing? You know, what's going on? You know, you think you want to kill yourself, or, you know, are you depressed or stuff like that? You know, we're maybe doing it in a more gentle way, but having those healing circles and just having, you know, people navigate through what does a healing circle look like? It just looked like one day, you know, telling your family, look, you know, we're going to cook everybody's favorite food. If everybody can be home at, you know, 6 o'clock, we're going to all eat together. We're going to turn off the TV and turn off our, you know, our phones and stuff like that. And we just going to check in. And so how do you do that? You know, well, let's talk about what's going on in the world. This time talking what's going on in the world. How you doing? You know, how you really doing? How you doing spiritually, mentally, and physically? And you'd be surprised the prompts, how that'll prompt a conversation in our family, you know, just to have those family dinners, or like my dad used to call them, you know, family meetings. And so I think that, you know, when we really try to get our families together, and just even with doing the holidays, we did that with my family, you know, for Christmas. What a good time. Everybody's, you know, feeling some kind of way and all happy. And, you know, so let's talk about how you really doing. How was this year for you? What's your goals for this year? And, you know, those are prompt conversations where we can start to listen, and we can start to hear, and then people can start to heal.
Yeah,
That's good.
I remember, you know, growing up, I feel like my parents spent a lot of time prepping me to be successful in the outside world. And so there were things that, you know, they say, you know, what happens in a house stays in a house. You don't talk about your business. You make sure you always look professional, make sure you articulate. There was never any time set aside to say, you know, hey, Ace, that's what my dad calls me. Hey, Ace, how are you doing? How are things going? I get those questions now. You know, my mother's no longer living. So my dad, he checks in a little more often. It's more so about me being a whole human versus making sure I have all of these things, I think, marked off of their parents' survival list. I remember being very young and him giving me the personal space exercise. You know, you stick your arm out, you make a circle. This is your personal space. This is how you keep yourself safe from people. So I grew up feeling very like, okay, I gotta protect myself. They can't see me as weak. You know, I have to be super confident. I have to be super competent. And so when someone asks me, how am I doing? My first response is, technically, it's not your business. It's something I'm going to have to deal with on my own. But that's a horrible mindset to have. But when you've been raised, technically, you know, not to trust anyone, you pray about it. It's great to go to therapy, but you don't really need that. You know, God's got it. And I'm a God-fearing person. But I'm also a therapist, right? You know, he gives us tools. Just really teaching this, it's not something that is normalized in our communities. It requires a whole brain shift that is very, very hard. It's very challenging because then we also don't trust. So if I come to you and I tell you how I feel, that means I'm going to have to put down my security system, my brick wall, my aluminum wall. I'm going to have to take down all of this security to tell you how I truly feel. And am I ready for your response? Are you going to hurt me? It's better up just for me to just keep my security system up because I don't have time. I know how to deal with my stuff as far as packing it down. If I let it out, I'm not sure how it's going to be received. And that's just me, you know, being transparent. It is very, very hard to do in our community.
Yeah, and that's why, you know, going from trauma to trust is no joke. You know, it really is, because, you know, a lot of times, you know, you think even the people that you trust will sometimes use your trauma against you. And that right there will traumatize you on a whole nother level.
And I think the word that also comes to mind when we talk about having the conversation is also being intentional about the conversation. Sometimes we have to do things intentionally and be ready to listen. I've met a lot of adolescents in my private practice where parents are not intentional about that. What I mean by it is that this kid is coming to them. They're coming to my sessions and they're saying things to parents, and the parents aren't taking those signs and those things and really being intentional about listening and hearing and understanding and not internalizing that. And so, you know, I think that, you know, we can talk about all day about normalizing the human experience. We can talk about ways to identify to do it. We could talk about how do we infiltrate the culture, but we got to start to be just strictly intentional about it. So it's more than just having the conversation, it's being intentional about this conversation. And how do you start to engage? What do you see? That kind of thing. And true, yes, educating parents. Parents got to be willing to listen though. I mean, I'll even use myself for an example. I mean, my son and I went through a pretty traumatic experience with a divorce. And I had to stop as a provider and actually really be intentional about listening to him and hearing what the therapists were saying to me and being intentional about even asking some of these people on this forum, okay, what can I do to help my kid? How can I help him be more expressive? How can I make him comfortable? So, you know, it's like, it's almost like a double-edged sword. Parents want to be educated, but they got to be ready to receive too.
Yeah, well, you have to be able to then utilize the tools. If you really are going to engage in that conversation with your friend, your strong friend, or if you really want to get educated about what your children are experiencing or helping them to express their emotions or have that safe space, then that also means that you have to have the time to hold that space, be present, stay in the moment, block out everything, and really be there. Which also means you're going to bring up your own stuff, which usually happens. What is that old time therapy saying? You can't take anyone as far as you have gone yourself. I think like you can't really be there for someone past where you've gone. So as you're opening up to other people, you're going to open up your own stuff and you're going to have to deal with your own stuff, because the only way that you can be present for them is to make sure that you've been present with yourself first. And that's hard to do. So you have to start, as Tonja said earlier, internally at home. And at home in this instance means yourself. You have to be able to start there first and work on your own struggles and traumas and situations, because that's the only way that you're going to be able to hear what other people are telling you.
You know, I'm gonna jump in here because all y'all ladies are talking. You know, being a black male. Hey, Joy.
Hey.
How y'all doing? Being a black male in the society, you know, one of the things we need is more formats like this. You know, I believe in education, communication, and conversation. you know, because without those, we cannot grow. So you're talking about coming from a society that tells you, you got to be strong, you got to be strong, you got to be strong, you got to be strong. But we're not learning what happens when we're less than strong. We take that definition of understanding, that the definition of per se other words, weak. What is weak? I don't want you to make me feel less than. I don't want you, so I'm not going to tell you how I feel. I'm not going to tell you this is really what's going on. I love when people that know me know I always talk about what we hear, that, oh, crazy Uncle Joe. That the stigma of crazy Uncle Joe. Oh, he's just crazy. That's old Uncle Joe. He's crazy. But not realizing that Uncle Joe has some mental health challenges going on. He's actually had some issues that in our community, we was not able to address those things at that time. And so glad that we are today, that we are coming to the forefront today to be able to recognize and educate ourselves that we can address those issues. You know, I have one of my, and I'm trying to figure out how to say it. One of my pet peeves that I have is conversation with youth. It's like, let me just say it. Talking to my granddaughter, she's real smart, but she dumbs herself down in her conversation because she's trying to fit in. And I heard somebody say that a little while ago with the society of young people today, you know, in the way they talk and you know, and I know, I'm 63 years old, so I know when I was young, we had a whole conversation different. You know, I think Ebonics was created when we were young, you know, I mean, a whole language. But it's until we educate ourselves and try and educate other people with this type of format, do we get better? You know, you remind me back to the, y'all was talking and I was thinking about the athletes from the Olympics, Biles and all of them. They're taught how to be strong and how to do the beam and how to be a great athlete, but you're not taught, and it just recently happened in the Olympics just recently, you're not taught what happens when you fail, what happens when you fall short. So we're being more, you know, taught about how big it is. We're being strength and beauty, and this society is about strength and beauty. You know, everybody, I'm not one of the guys, I ain't got strength nor beauty. So where do I fit in? You know, so just educating and learning ourselves so that we can develop an education and teach others that they no longer have to fear that, you know. Yeah. So I love this format. I just want to step in there and say, I love this format, besides a bunch of ladies talking. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So we want to make sure that we continue the conversation, but also we have a very short video on, if we could put back for the slides back up, we have a really short video on conversations on Black healing and what is healing.
I would define healing as the intentional work we do to remember that we are whole, complete, and lacking nothing.
Healing is calling the raw materials into your life that you need in order to move past a trauma or move past a blockage for yourself, an energetic blockage.
I believe that we come into the world without blemish, even though religion would often tell us that we came into the world sinful. I believe that the blemishes come when we encounter trauma, when we encounter the hurts and wounds in our lives that deal with people that we lost, that deal with people that abandon us, that are centered around structural racism and what we experience in these institutions that are centered around poverty. Those external things attempt to make us believe that we are incomplete.
So if we can move to the next slide, we wanted to start switching the conversation into now what? And I think that switch is starting to happen in the chat a little bit on, so what do we do? How do we help? how do we start with ourselves? How do we have those conversations? As Tonja said, what were we talking about? How do we start going deeper with individuals, or just asking how individuals are? So one of the things that we wanted to do was to continue the conversation around BEAM. We've been talking about BEAM, Black Emotional and Mental Health Collective, for I would say at least a year, 18 months now. And so we wanted to bring it back to this organization as a part of our resources and a part of what we can do. I would really encourage everyone to go to the website, because they do have very short, targeted graphics like this that really leads kind of this step-by-step kind of focused approach through how to check in with myself. Just quick, fast, and easy, easy to print off, easy to have up in front of you, just easy to do a quick check-in with yourself, and then how to start having the conversations with others. And I thought this peer support model that would really resonate with all of us, since we all believe in the power of peers and being with, but really talking through how to listen, how to affirm someone's experience, how to partner to navigate care, how to initiate a care plan, and how to seek out help if needed. So I just wanted to put this information out there as we start to talk about resources of how do we check in with ourselves, and how do we support ourselves, and then how do we support others. And if we can move to the next slide. And then this is another one about common coping strategies, and this is from BEAM as well. Just how to be mindful, to nurture yourself, redirect, soothe, emotional awareness, and again, that community care planning. So just a way to kind of implement coping strategies, or support others with implementing coping strategies. Tonja talked about healing circles. Did I get that right? Healing circles. And that is how to be with someone. How amazing would it be to be able to hold that space, just 5 to 10 minutes with our coworker that's struggling that day, outside in the break room, just holding that space for them in a mindful, nurturing way, to be able to support them. And then RI has websites of hope as well. Moving America Solo on Suicide is one that has videos, and then Hope Inc. Has videos, and also has sayings that come out. You see them in the Staying Connected every Friday, just locations where you can just get information to support hope, inspire hope, pick yourself up, pick someone else up. I don't know how Hope Inc. does it, but sometimes I just get the right quote on the right day to my email. I don't know how that happens, but sometimes it just comes to me. So you can also sign up for the Hope Inc. Emails, and then 3 times a week you will get that inspiration, those questions, that support right in your email. And like I said, I don't know how they do it, but sometimes it just comes right on time. And next slide, please. And then someone to call. We wanted to make sure to include the Suicide Prevention Lifeline here, and then also the text options, just to make sure that if there's someone here that is struggling or knows someone who's struggling, there are resources to reach out to wherever you are across the country. Of course, you can reach out to your coworkers or to your supervisors and all that, but there's also these resources to reach out to. And then next slide. And the last slide, and we'll still have a little bit more time to kind of discuss this one, but I just thought these were powerful. Today I can. So each one is an affirmation for anyone. What can we do? What can we do to support individuals, to support the Black community, to support Black families, to support our Black coworkers, our neighbors? What can we do? And each one has a different today I can. So I will do blank to create a world where all Black people living with mental distress and suicidal ideations are supported. I recommit to being a safe space for all Black folks struggling with mental health. I pledge to unlearn ableism and mental health stigma. I pledge to listen to those struggling and validate their truths. I pledge to support my community in radical restorative healing. I will take time to uplift the memories of Black folks who have lost to suicide, or to Black folks we have lost to suicide by. I will support the families and communities of Black folks who have lost loved ones to suicide by. And then finally, I will not allow people to shame Black folks who have contemplated or completed suicide. I will fight back by. Tonja, you wanna?
Yeah, I just want to, say 4 things before I close and close. Thank you so much, Joy, for doing this and the whole the whole staff that put this together. This has really been amazing. And as I was thinking about everything that we've talked about, and we talked about resources, which is key. And out of all of this, the people that I feel sorry for the most in my life was my mom and dad. My mom and dad, they're not alive today. And I can only imagine what they went through when they saw their little girl try to kill herself for the first time and the second time, and had all the issues that I had. And they did the best they could with what they have. They just did not have the resources like we're talking about today. And I'm so glad that those resources are being made available to communities of color like never before. I think about my parents and my heart hurts. I also want people to know that therapy ain't scary. It's not. I think it's the best thing that any of us can do, for ourselves. If we go get a trainer, if we go work out for an hour, we're going to the gym religiously, or whatever it is that we do, retail therapy. Getting the therapist should be the same way. It is not scary. That is your 45 minutes, your hour to do you, boo, to work on you. That someone who's trained and licensed should be there to listen, actively listen, and just help you process stuff. And then the other thing is, it's okay to have a scripture and a script. I have both. I read it one in the morning and I take a script. It's okay to have both. And in the African American community, in the faith-based community, you're not supposed to have both. The devil is a lie. And then lastly, if we can, a lot of the stuff we're talking about that needs to happen in the house, but some kids don't have that privilege and right yet. We're working on that as a society. So if you can, take these resources to your local school and make sure that they have that suicide hotline. Make sure that they know what resources are, because our babies are struggling. They're going through a whole lot. Look, I thought I knew. It ain't nothing nice out here. And what our kids are going through right now is just really, it's a challenge. I go into high school and middle schools twice a week, and those kids are suffering. They're going through a lot mentally and emotionally. And so having these resources and having folks like you who do this work every day, anything we can do to help ourselves first and then help others, I believe will really make a difference.
And Tonja, my last thoughts are just what you said at the end, to help ourselves first. We've been talking about this community, and we've had 50 something or plus people on this call who are all thinking the same way, who are all talking in the same way, who have said that they are willing to be there to support. So think about those individuals who we have a community with already. RI is very unique. It is very innovative. But we also need to use that on ourselves and to support each other with it as well. We can only support the guests or citizens or participants or whatever we're calling them today if we are okay. And we have this community that's here that we can continue to have conversations like this when things are happening around us, and maybe we can't talk to family members, maybe we can't talk to our friends, maybe we're not understood anywhere else but here. And so this is one of the reasons that this council and these forums are so important, because we have to make sure that we provide the opportunity to process for all of us what's happening every single day all around us in order to be able to provide that safe space for us as well. So I'm really glad you guys were able to join us today to have this conversation. And we want to make sure we can continue these conversations throughout the year as things keep happening. As Tonja said, since we started talking about this forum, this discussion, we've had so many other things happen. We're on the verge of war. So there's just so many conversations that we need to have in safe space for our coworkers. So this is just a start to work towards that.
Enjoy really quick. Hey guys, so the DEILC, we will be sending out, and that stands for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Leadership Council. We will be sending out a pulse survey to the company on March 1st. And that pulse survey is our way of engaging with you all. So like we've been saying, that the motto of the year is we are not the voice of everyone. However, we are in place to make sure everyone has the opportunity to have a voice. So we need to make sure that we are engaging with you all. We want your feedback. We want to know if you enjoyed this conversation and there are other things that you want to hear and or talk about, or if there are changes you want to see within the company, or if there are difficult conversations that you feel need to be had, please respond to that survey. We are looking for your candid answers. Please do not be afraid to be, as I call it, 100 with us, because we want to be a 100 council, okay? In the event you need to reach out to us directly, Carrie and Karen have put our email address in the box, DILC at riinternational.com. So I did just want to put that plug in there while we're talking about engagement. Thank you, Tanya and Tonja and Joy.